Throughout history, the Church has consistently taught that the Eucharist is not a mere symbol, but the true body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ. While this teaching is rooted in Scripture and upheld by tradition, many Catholics and non-Catholics alike struggle to believe in the mystery of transubstantiation. How can ordinary bread and wine truly become the presence of Christ? In moments of doubt, God has provided extraordinary signs to affirm this truth: Eucharistic miracles. These supernatural events where the consecrated host visibly transforms into flesh and blood, where bleeding hosts defy scientific explanation, or where the Eucharist demonstrates miraculous preservation, serve as irrefutable evidence that Christ is truly present in the Blessed Sacrament. From the famous miracle of Lanciano, where a consecrated host turned into human heart tissue, to modern miracles that continue to be studied by scientists today, the reality of these events is undeniable. These miracles have baffled medical experts, strengthened the faith of countless believers, and confirmed what the Church has proclaimed for over 2,000 years. The Eucharist is truly the body of Christ. But why does God allow these miracles? What do they reveal about the state of faith in the world? And how can we, as Catholics, respond to these divine manifestations? Today, we will explore the most astonishing Eucharistic miracles ever recorded, diving deep into their historical and scientific evidence. By the end of this video, you will have an entirely new perspective on the Eucharist. You will see why these miracles matter, how they call us to deeper reverence, and why they should ignite within us an unshakable devotion to Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. Stay with me as we embark on this awe-inspiring journey through divine intervention. The Eucharist is the greatest mystery of the Catholic faith. At every Mass, the priest pronounces the words of consecration, and the bread and wine become the actual body and blood of Christ. This transformation, known as transubstantiation, is not something that can be perceived by the senses. The appearance, taste, and texture remain the same, but the substance is entirely changed. This teaching is rooted in Jesus' own words at the Last Supper: "This is my body, this is my blood." Matthew 26:26-28. Christ did not say, "This represents my body," nor did he describe the Eucharist as a mere symbol. The early Church Fathers, from St. Ignatius of Antioch to St. Augustine, affirmed that the Eucharist is not figurative, but a literal participation in the body and blood of Christ. Yet, despite this clear teaching, many struggle to believe. In our modern scientific age, people demand tangible proof before accepting something as true. Faith alone is not enough for many. This is where Eucharistic miracles come in. They serve as God's response to human doubt, offering visible, undeniable evidence of what the Church has always proclaimed. Eucharistic miracles are not mere legends or exaggerated stories. Many of them have been investigated by scientists, physicians, and even skeptics, only to be found unexplainable by natural means. Studies have revealed that these miraculous hosts contain human heart tissue, often from a person suffering immense agony, matching the description of Christ's passion. But perhaps the most important question is, why does God allow these miracles to happen? The answer lies in the growing crisis of faith in the Eucharist. Many Catholics today no longer believe in the real presence, treating Holy Communion as a symbolic gesture rather than a sacred encounter with Christ. These miracles serve as divine wake-up calls, urging the Church to return to a profound reverence for the Blessed Sacrament. As we explore these miracles, let us approach them not as mere stories, but as personal messages from Christ himself, inviting us to deepen our faith in his presence. One of the most famous Eucharistic miracles in history occurred in Lanciano, Italy, in the 8th century. A Basilian monk who was struggling with doubts about the real presence was celebrating Mass when, at the moment of consecration, the host visibly turned into flesh, and the wine became real blood. For centuries, the miraculous relics were preserved in Lanciano, where they remained incorrupt and unchanged. But the true test came in 1971, when a team of scientists led by Dr. Edoardo Linoli, a renowned pathologist, was allowed to examine the relics. What they discovered was nothing short of astonishing. Under microscopic analysis, the consecrated host was found to be actual human heart tissue, specifically myocardial tissue from the left ventricle, the part of the heart responsible for pumping blood throughout the body. Even more incredible, the tissue showed signs of extreme stress, as if it had belonged to a person who had suffered immense trauma. a direct parallel to Christ's suffering on the cross. The blood, analyzed separately, was found to be human blood type AB, the same blood type found on the Shroud of Turin. Even though the relics had been preserved for over 200 years, the blood still had the properties of fresh blood, a phenomenon that defied all medical understanding. Dr. Linoli, though initially skeptical, concluded that the Lanciano miracle had no scientific explanation. The Church, having already upheld the authenticity of the miracle for centuries, reaffirmed it as one of the most powerful proofs of Christ's real presence in the Eucharist. This miracle speaks directly to those who doubt. If the Eucharist were merely symbolic, why would a host physically transform into human heart tissue? Why would its properties match the very essence of a suffering man's heart? And why has it remained incorrupt for over 1,000 years? The miracle of Lanciano stands as a divine response to skepticism, inviting believers and non-believers alike to witness the truth that Christ is truly present in the Blessed Sacrament. While many Eucharistic miracles occurred centuries ago, there are recent cases that continue to baffle scientists. One of the most remarkable modern miracles took place in Buenos Aires, Argentina, in 1996. Unlike medieval miracles that some might dismiss as legend, this event was investigated using state-of-the-art technology, making it one of the most compelling proofs of the real presence in the modern era. The incident occurred when a consecrated host was found discarded in a church in Buenos Aires. A priest placed the host in a container of water, following standard church practice to allow it to dissolve before being respectfully disposed of. However, days later, the host had not dissolved. Instead, it had transformed into what appeared to be a piece of flesh, with red blood-like stains forming on its surface. The case was taken seriously by church authorities. After careful observation, the then Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio, who later became Pope Francis, ordered a scientific investigation. A team of specialists, including renowned pathologist Dr. Frederick Zugibe, was given access to the sample for extensive analysis. What they found was shocking. Under microscopic examination, the tissue was identified as human heart muscle, specifically from the left ventricle, the part of the heart that pumps blood through the body. Even more incredibly, the cells showed signs of being alive and in distress, as if they were still beating when the sample was taken. This is scientifically impossible, as the tissue had been removed from any living organism for weeks. Dr. Zugibe, who had no prior knowledge of where the sample had come from, was asked about his findings. He stated that the heart tissue belonged to a man who had undergone extreme agony and suffering. When he was later informed that the sample had come from a consecrated host, he was stunned. This modern Eucharistic miracle defies all natural explanation. How could a consecrated host suddenly become living heart tissue? Why did the cells show signs of life, despite being separated from a body? And why does this miracle match so many others throughout history? The miracle of Buenos Aires is one of the most compelling proofs of Christ's presence in the Eucharist, especially in an age where faith in the real presence is declining. This event reminds us that God is still speaking to us today, providing visible signs to reignite faith in the Blessed Sacrament. In 2006, in the small town of Tixtla, Mexico, another astonishing Eucharistic miracle occurred. During Mass, as a priest distributed Holy Communion, one of the consecrated hosts began to emit blood. Witnesses were stunned as they saw deep red liquid flowing from the host, something completely unexplainable by natural means. Church authorities immediately intervened, conducting a thorough investigation. The host was examined by medical and forensic experts, who confirmed that the red substance was indeed human blood, type AB positive, the same type found in the miracles of Lanciano and Buenos Aires, as well as on the Shroud of Turin. Further microscopic studies revealed something even more incredible. Within the host, the blood appeared to originate from within the structure of the bread itself, rather than being externally applied. This meant that the bleeding was not caused by any outside interference. It came from the very substance of the host. When scientists analyzed the blood cells, they found that they were still alive, as if they had been taken from a living human at the moment of suffering. This detail is crucial because it aligns with other Eucharistic miracles, where the tissue examined comes from a heart undergoing extreme agony, mirroring Christ's passion. The Church has interpreted this miracle as a divine warning and a call to Eucharistic renewal. At the time, Mexico was experiencing a decline in faith and an increase in secularism, with many Catholics no longer believing in the real presence. The bleeding host was seen as Christ's way of reminding his people that the Eucharist is truly his body and blood, and that we must approach it with profound reverence. The miracle of Tixla is another clear sign that God continues to manifest himself through the Blessed Sacrament, calling the world to return to true devotion. If Christ is willing to give us such a miraculous sign, how much more should we strive to increase our love for the Eucharist? In Sokolka, Poland, in 2008, yet another Eucharistic miracle stunned both scientists and theologians. During Mass, a consecrated host was accidentally dropped on the floor. As per church protocol, the priest placed it in a vessel of water to dissolve before proper disposal. However, after several days, something remarkable happened. The host had not dissolved, but instead had developed a red center resembling living flesh. Church officials decided to investigate the phenomenon. The host was given to specialists in medical pathology, who conducted rigorous scientific tests. What they discovered was mind-blowing. The red substance was not just any tissue, it was human heart tissue, once again from the left ventricle, with signs of extreme distress and suffering. Even more astonishing was the way the tissue merged seamlessly with the remaining unleavened bread of the host. Under a microscope, there was no visible separation between the bread and the flesh, as if the two had miraculously become one. This baffled scientists, as such an occurrence is biologically impossible. Further testing confirmed that the tissue was not artificially added and had not decayed despite being exposed to normal conditions. This aligns perfectly with the Eucharistic miracles of Lanciano, Buenos Aires, and Tixla, once again showing that these miraculous events are interconnected across history and geography. The Church views the Sokolka miracle as a powerful confirmation of transubstantiation, proving that the Eucharist is not just a symbol, but a living reality. This event calls all Catholics to reflect deeply on how they receive and honor the Blessed Sacrament. With so many Eucharistic miracles occurring throughout history and in modern times, we must ask ourselves, how do we respond to these divine signs? These miracles are not just extraordinary events for us to marvel at. They are calls to action. Christ is making his presence known in the Eucharist, but are we truly treating the Blessed Sacrament with the reverence it deserves? Many Catholics today receive the Eucharist without proper preparation, in a state of distraction, or even in mortal sin. Some no longer kneel, fail to make a sign of reverence, or approach Holy Communion with a casual attitude. These miracles are a reminder that we are not receiving mere bread. We are receiving the living Christ. The response to these miracles should be a renewed devotion to the Eucharist. This means attending Mass with reverence, going to confession regularly, spending time in Eucharistic adoration, and approaching the altar with a heart full of love and awe. In the next sections, we will explore what we can do to restore faith in the real presence and how to deepen our personal devotion to Christ in the Eucharist. Eucharistic miracles throughout history have repeatedly revealed one fascinating pattern. The blood found in these miracles is consistently AB positive, the same blood type discovered on the Shroud of Turin. This connection is more than coincidence. It serves as divine confirmation that the same Jesus who suffered and died on the cross is the one truly present in the Eucharist. The Shroud of Turin, believed to be the burial cloth of Christ, has undergone extensive scientific testing. The image on the cloth depicts a man who endured severe torture, with wounds corresponding to the exact suffering described in the Gospels. His body shows the marks of scourging, the crown of thorns, and the brutal piercing of his hands and feet, evidence of his crucifixion. When the blood on the shroud was analyzed, it was found to be type AB positive, the same as in Eucharistic miracles such as Lanciano, Buenos Aires, Tixla, and Sokolka. One of the most astounding discoveries about the shroud is the presence of living white blood cells in the sample, something scientifically impossible for a cloth that is over 2,000 years old. The only way white blood cells could still be present is if they had undergone immense trauma and stress, such as what would occur in the agony of the Passion. The Eucharistic miracles display the same characteristic. The tissue found in these hosts comes from a heart that has suffered extreme agony, just like the man in the shroud. This undeniable link between Eucharistic miracles and the Shroud of Turin suggests something profound. It is as if God himself is giving us physical proof that the same body that suffered for us on Calvary is the same body we receive in Holy Communion. This realization should shake us to the core. Every time we approach the altar, we are not merely participating in a ritual, We are encountering the very flesh of the crucified and risen Christ. But how many Catholics today truly understand this? How many of us receive the Eucharist with the same awe and trembling that the saints did? If Eucharistic miracles and the shroud point us so clearly to the truth, why is there still so much doubt among the faithful? This connection is an urgent wake-up call for Catholics everywhere. We must not only believe in the real presence, we must worship and adore Christ in the Eucharist with the reverence he deserves. One of the most alarming realities facing the Church today is that many Catholics no longer believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. According to surveys, over 70% of Catholics see the Eucharist as only a symbol rather than the actual body and blood of Christ. This represents a profound crisis of faith, one that threatens the very foundation of Catholic worship. But this crisis is not new. Throughout history, periods of doubt, heresy, and indifference have led to a loss of faith in the Eucharist. It is precisely during these times that God has chosen to intervene through Eucharistic miracles. When people question his presence, he responds by giving visible signs that demand belief. Consider the timing of some of the greatest Eucharistic miracles. The miracle of Lanciano happened during a period of rising theological skepticism. The miracles in Buenos Aires and Tixtla occurred in societies where secularism and religious indifference were spreading. God has repeatedly shown that when faith in the Eucharist weakens, he offers miracles to bring people back to the truth. Yet, even in the face of miracles, many still refuse to believe. Some dismiss them as hallucinations, medieval myths, or pious exaggerations, even though scientific analysis has repeatedly confirmed their authenticity. This refusal to acknowledge the evidence reflects a deeper problem. The modern world has lost its sense of the sacred. Eucharistic miracles are not just historical relics. They are God's direct response to the disbelief of our time. If we are witnessing an increase in these miracles today, it is because God is urgently calling us to return to true faith in his real presence. The question is, will we listen? Or will we, like so many before us, ignore the signs he has given us? The saints have always been the greatest defenders of the Eucharist. Their lives provide testimony not only to their belief in the real presence, but also to the supernatural power of the Blessed Sacrament. Many saints experienced Eucharistic miracles firsthand, while others survived for years on nothing but the Eucharist alone. One of the most astonishing cases is that of Saint Clare of Assisi. When an army of invaders threatened her convent, she took the Blessed Sacrament in a monstrance, held it high, and prayed for protection. Suddenly, the enemy was overcome with fear and fled, leaving the convent untouched. This event was a visible sign that the Eucharist is more powerful than any earthly force. Another extraordinary case is Saint Catherine of Siena, who lived for years consuming only the Eucharist. Doctors who examined her were baffled. She should not have survived, yet she was strong, full of energy, and radiant with divine grace. This phenomenon, known as inedia, has been documented in multiple saints and serves as a testament that the Eucharist is not mere bread. It is truly the bread of life. Perhaps one of the most moving testimonies comes from Saint Tarcisius, a young boy who was martyred while protecting the Eucharist. He was carrying the Blessed Sacrament to imprisoned Christians when he was attacked by a group of pagans. Though beaten to death, he refused to let go of the Eucharist, choosing to die rather than allow it to be desecrated. His sacrifice is a reminder that the Eucharist is worth everything, even our very lives. These saints remind us that belief in the real presence is not just an intellectual concept. It is a reality that should shape our entire existence. If the saints lived and died for the Eucharist, how can we approach it with casualness or indifference? The power of the Eucharist is undeniable. It has sustained the saints, driven back armies, and transformed lives. But do we recognize this power in our own lives? Or have we become blind to the gift that is before us? One of the greatest spiritual dangers in the Church today is Eucharistic indifference. While Eucharistic miracles serve as powerful reminders of Christ's real presence, many Catholics approach the Blessed Sacrament with routine, distraction, or even irreverence. The truth is, we have become too familiar with the extraordinary, and as a result, we risk losing the sense of awe and reverence that the Eucharist deserves. Imagine this. If you were standing before Jesus in his human form, would you be distracted, dressed casually, or thinking about something else? Would you receive him without a second thought, as if it were just another part of your day? And yet, This is exactly what happens when people receive the Eucharist without preparation, without reflection, and without gratitude. Many Catholics today approach communion without even believing in what they are receiving. Some attend Mass simply out of obligation, without confessing mortal sins, or treating the Eucharist as nothing more than a symbolic ritual. This is a grave offense against Christ, who is truly present. St. Paul himself warned in 1 Corinthians 11:27-29 that those who receive the Eucharist unworthily eat and drink judgment upon themselves. Why do Eucharistic miracles happen? Because God is calling us to wake up from our spiritual apathy. These miracles are divine reminders that the Eucharist is not just a religious practice, it is the very heartbeat of our faith. When we fail to recognize its importance, we risk losing the greatest gift Christ has given us. We must ask ourselves, do I truly believe in the Eucharist? Do I receive it with love and reverence? Or have I allowed my faith to become lukewarm? Eucharistic miracles challenge us to renew our devotion, to return to the altar with awe and gratitude, and to never take Christ for granted again. The next section will explore how we can restore faith in the Eucharist in our personal lives and communities. If we truly believe that Jesus Christ is present in the Eucharist, our actions must reflect that belief. The saints understood this, and they lived their lives in total reverence for the Blessed Sacrament. But today, many Catholics have lost the sense of the sacred. How can we restore Eucharistic faith, not just in our own hearts, but in our parishes and the Church as a whole? The first step is personal conversion. Before we can change anything in the Church, we must start with ourselves. This means examining how we approach the Eucharist. Do I prepare my soul through confession before receiving communion? Do I arrive at Mass early to pray and reflect? Do I receive the Eucharist with deep reverence, kneeling if possible? Second, we must encourage Eucharistic adoration. Spending time before the Blessed Sacrament transforms our hearts and deepens our awareness of Christ's presence. The more we adore Him, the more we recognize Him in the Mass. Many Eucharistic miracles have occurred in places where faith was diminishing, perhaps because God wants us to return to gazing upon Him with love and adoration. Third, we need to restore traditional practices that express reverence, such as receiving communion on the tongue and kneeling as a sign of humility before Christ, bringing back sacred music, Latin prayers, and moments of silence in the liturgy. One of the most powerful ways to strengthen our faith in the real presence is through Eucharistic adoration. Spending time in silent prayer before the Blessed Sacrament allows us to encounter Christ in a deeply personal way, free from distractions. Many saints, including St. John Paul II, St. Teresa of Calcutta, and St. Padre Pio, spent hours each day before the Eucharist. Why? Because they understood that in adoration, they were not just praying, they were sitting in the presence of the living God. The Church teaches that even a few minutes in Eucharistic adoration can change a person's life. Studies have shown that parishes that offer regular adoration experience an increase in vocations, conversions, and deeper faith among parishioners. Imagine if every Catholic spent time before the Eucharist each week. How much stronger would our faith be? How many more souls would be saved? Eucharistic adoration is not just an option, it is a necessity for renewing the Church. Throughout history, the saints have demonstrated incredible devotion to the Eucharist, often experiencing supernatural encounters that reaffirm the real presence. St. John Vianney would spend hours in adoration, stating, "If we truly understood the Mass, we would die of joy." St. Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest theologians in Church history, described the Eucharist as the greatest miracle Christ ever performed. St. Alphonsus Liguori wrote, "You may be sure that of all the moments of life, the time you spend before the Blessed Sacrament will be the most profitable to you in life and in death." What these saints understood is that the Eucharist is the source of all holiness. If we desire to grow in our spiritual lives, we must do as they did, center our entire lives around the Blessed Sacrament, reintroducing Eucharistic processions to publicly proclaim faith in the real presence. Finally, we must educate others. Many Catholics do not believe in the Eucharist simply because they were never taught the truth. We must share the stories of Eucharistic miracles, the writings of the saints, and the teachings of the Church, ensuring that future generations do not fall into ignorance or disbelief. If we truly love Christ, we cannot remain silent. The time has come to rebuild a culture of Eucharistic reverence, starting with ourselves. Eucharistic miracles are not just stories from the past. They are God's response to our disbelief. Through these miracles, Christ is calling the world back to faith in his real presence. But the question remains, will we listen? If we truly believe in the Eucharist, then we must act like it. This means approaching the altar with reverence and humility, defending the truth of the real presence without fear, spending time in Eucharistic adoration to deepen our faith. Most importantly, we must spread this message. The world needs to know that Christ is truly here, in every tabernacle, waiting for us with love. If we do not proclaim this truth, who will? So I invite you to take action today. Strengthen your faith, educate others, and most importantly, fall in love with the Eucharist again. Subscribe to the channel and follow Jesus. Share this message so that more people can discover the truth about the Blessed Sacrament. If this video has impacted you, leave a comment below. Which Eucharistic miracle moved you the most? How has your faith in the Eucharist grown? My name is Oliver, and it has been an honor to take this journey with you. Remember, you are not alone in this mission. We are in this together, walking toward Christ. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, may God bless you abundantly, and may your heart always burn with love for the Holy Eucharist. We have explored some of the most extraordinary Eucharistic miracles in history, undeniable proof that Jesus is truly present in the Blessed Sacrament. These miracles are not just stories from the past. They are God's response to our disbelief, his way of saying, I am here. I have never left you. But now the question is not whether these miracles are real. The question is, how will you respond? Will you continue treating the Eucharist as just another part of your Sunday routine? Or will you begin to approach it with the awe and reverence it deserves? Will you take these miracles as a wake-up call and deepen your faith? Or will you ignore the evidence and remain indifferent? The truth is, we are being called to a Eucharistic revival. The world is forgetting the real presence of Christ, but you and I can change that. It starts with each of us renewing our devotion, going to confession, preparing our hearts before Mass, receiving Jesus with love and humility, and spending time in Eucharistic adoration. But we must go even further. We must spread this truth to others. Share these miracles, educate your family and friends, and be a witness to the power of the Eucharist. God has given us proof. Now it's our turn to proclaim it. If this message has moved you, if you believe that more people need to know the truth about the Eucharist, then help me spread this mission. Subscribe to the channel and follow Jesus. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new video, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let's work together to restore faith in the real presence. And I want to hear from you. Which Eucharistic miracle impacted you the most? How has your belief in the real presence changed? Comment below. I read every message, and your testimony can inspire someone else to grow in faith. My name is Oliver, and it has been a privilege to share this journey with you. This is not just another video. This is a movement to bring the world back to the heart of Christ in the Eucharist. Know that you are not alone. We are all walking this path of faith together, growing closer to Christ one step at a time. Stay strong, keep seeking the truth, and never stop deepening your love for the Eucharist. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, may God bless you abundantly, and may your heart always burn with love for the Holy Eucharist.